All right, let's dive right into this explainer. If you've ever felt the absolute crushing weight of a looming deadline, only to find yourself inexplicably, alphabetizing your spice rack instead of actually working, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're decoding Dr. Piers Steele's groundbreaking work, The Procrastination Equation, to figure out the exact and frankly surprising mechanics of why we delay. Never put off till tomorrow what you can do the day after tomorrow. Mark Twain hit the nail on the head with that one, didn't he? It perfectly captures the universal struggle of procrastination. We so often talk about putting things off like it's this massive personal failing or just pure laziness. But the truth is, as you'll see, it's actually a deeply ingrained part of our human biology. So if you're feeling guilty, let me stop you right there. A staggering 95% of people openly admit to procrastinating. Honestly, that's pretty much everybody. And about a quarter of those folks say it's a chronic, defining characteristic of their entire lives. So if you're constantly beating yourself up about that unwritten report or that completely dusty gym membership, just take a deep breath. You aren't broken. You're simply experiencing a very normal, incredibly human phenomenon. Here's our quick roadmap for the explainer. We're going to look at the anatomy of a procrastinator, bust the perfectionism myth, meet the 3 archetypes, decode the equation itself, explore the brain's tug-of-war, and finally unpack our evolutionary hangover. Okay, let's jump straight into section 1, anatomy of a procrastinator. We really need to clear something up first. There is a massive difference between irrational delay, which is true procrastination, and just, being smart with your time. If you delay arriving at a party so you aren't that awkward first guest, or say you paused mowing the lawn because your kitchen caught on fire, that is a wise delay. Procrastination is an irrational delay. It's when we completely, voluntarily put off tasks, even though we know, deep down in our bones, that we're going to be worse off for doing it. Moving on to section 2, the perfectionism myth. You know how in job interviews, everyone loves to say, oh, my biggest weakness is that I'm just too much of a perfectionist. Yeah, well, we need to completely bust the myth that perfectionism causes procrastination. Science actually shows our real Achilles heel is impulsiveness. Studies looking at tens of thousands of people prove that neat, orderly perfectionists absolutely procrastinate less. We only thought otherwise because perfectionists who do happen to procrastinate are just way more likely to seek therapy, which kind of skewed the data. The true culprit, the real dark heart of procrastination, is impulsiveness. It's living impatiently in the moment and wanting the reward right now. Let's look at section 3, the 3 archetypes. To really understand what kills our motivation, let's meet 3 super relatable characters. Finding out which one sounds most like you is step 1 to fixing the problem. First up is Eddie. Imagine Eddie is in a brutally tough sales job. He's been rejected so many times, he practically expects the customer to hang up before he even finishes dialing. It creates this awful state of learned helplessness. I mean, if you don't actually expect to succeed, you just won't try, right? You'll find yourself organizing your desk drawers instead of making calls. Eddie shows us how a lack of expectancy and self-confidence literally drains the motivation to even start. Then we have Valerie. Now, Valerie is staring down a mind-numbingly boring paper on municipal politics. The task holds absolutely zero value or joy for her. Because it's so tedious, her brain is constantly hunting for an escape hatch. You know the feeling. Checking your phone, watching a quick video, texting a friend. We naturally run away from whatever we find universally burdensome. Valerie perfectly demonstrates that when a task lacks value, our minds just slide right off into more appealing distractions. And finally, there's Tom. Tom wants to book a great hotel for a vacation, but the trip is months away. Because the deadline is so far in the future, it feels totally abstract to him. Meanwhile, his favorite TV show is on right now. That is concrete, that is immediate. Tom represents the ultimate factor, time and impulsiveness. His high impulsiveness makes him deeply discount future rewards just so he can get that sweet, instant gratification. Actually, ask yourself this question right now to fill your own sensitivity to time discounting. If I handed you $1,000 in crisp bills today, would you give it back to me if I offered you a guaranteed check for $2,000, but you couldn't cash it for an entire year? A lot of people say absolutely no way, or they demand like $3,000 just to endure the wait. It perfectly highlights how intensely we devalue future rewards. We just want the payout now. Which brings us to section 4, the procrastination equation. This is where it gets incredibly cool. We can actually combine those 3 archetypes, expectancy, value, and impulsiveness over time, into one elegant formula. Motivation equals expectancy times value divided by impulsiveness times delay. Let's break that down. It's easier than it looks. The top half is your drive, how confident you are you'll succeed, multiplied by how much you actually care about the reward. But the bottom half? That is the friction. It's your personal level of impulsiveness multiplied by how far away the deadline is. Watch what happens as the delay shrinks and the deadline gets closer. That bottom half gets smaller, and boom, your motivation absolutely skyrockets. Let's look at how this plays out visually. Imagine our archetypes are tackling a big college essay. See that dotted line dropping from the top left? That's their motivation to socialize, which slowly tanks as the guilt starts building up. The solid lines climbing up are their motivation to actually sit down and work. Look closely at Tom, the impulsive guy with the square markers. His motivation to work stays completely flat for weeks. It's only when the deadline is quite literally staring him in the face that his motivation spikes dramatically and finally crosses that dotted line. And get this, real-world data completely backs this up. It creates this crazy shark fin spike in effort that perfectly matches the equation. In a huge study of college students taking a self-paced computer course, the actual pace of their completed assignments, that dark line there, tracked almost perfectly with the mathematical model. They didn't work at a steady pace at all. They totally flatlined until the delay dropped to 0, and then they panicked and did the whole shebang at once. Let's dig deeper in Section 5, the brain's tug of war. So why exactly does our motivation do this? It literally comes down to the biological hardware inside our skulls. This whole struggle is essentially a brutal tug of war between your impulsive limbic system, which is screaming for an immediate reward, and your prefrontal cortex, which is desperately trying to execute long-term plans. Think of it like a wild horse and a rider. The limbic system is the horse. It's ancient, it's fast, instinctual, and deeply wired to react to immediate impart. The prefrontal cortex is the rider. That's our executive function, handling logic and long-term goals. Procrastination simply happens when the horse overpowers the rider, usually because the temptation of right now is just way too strong. And that leads us perfectly into our final part, Section 6, an evolutionary hangover. You might be wondering, why on earth did nature design us to be our own worst enemies when it comes to getting stuff done? Well, as this timeline shows, patience just isn't innate. A newborn baby is purely limbic. You cannot ask a crying infant to patiently wait for their milk, right? It actually takes until about age 4 for that prefrontal cortex to develop enough just to play a simple game of Simon Says, which requires stopping an immediate impulse. And astonishingly, this crucial biological hardware for self-control isn't even fully baked until we are around 19 or 20 years old. See, we evolved through a process called optimal foraging. Back in the day, survival literally meant grabbing immediate rewards, not planning for a retirement fund decades away. For millions of years, if our ancestors found high-calorie, sugary, or fatty food, the most rational, logical thing to do was eat it instantly before it spoiled or a rival stole it. I mean, think about it. There were no Neanderthals on diets. Impulsiveness was a crucial survival trait. We are genetically hardwired to get the most calories and the most immediate rewards in the absolute shortest time possible. So please, cut yourself some slack. You are not uniquely broken. You are just dealing with a massive evolutionary hangover, where your ancient survival traits are violently clashing with modern responsibilities. Your biology fully expects a world where you hunt your dinner and eat it today. It has absolutely no idea what to do with a 30-year mortgage or a thesis that's due in 6 months. The delay is simply too vast for our ancient limbic systems to even comprehend. The tug of war in your brain is absolutely real, but hey, now you know the actual math behind it. You can rewrite the outcome. You know the variables now: expectancy, value, impulsiveness, and delay. So look at that one big task you've been avoiding all week. Be honest with yourself. Which variable is failing you? And what exactly are you going to do to outsmart your own biology right now?